Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about the torn and restored newspaper. And I'm doing this for David La Marca. Is that how you pronounce David La Marca? He made a comment down below in one of the earlier videos, a much earlier video, and said, would you please do a presentation on the torn and restored newspaper? Weeks went by and I didn't do it and I didn't do it, and recently he posted again. He said, would you please do a presentation on the torn and restored newspaper? And I'm happy to do it. This effect was in my show for many years. I would, just to put it in perspective, I would say that I probably put it in the show in the mid 1980s. And I probably took it out of the show in the late 1990s. So it was about a decade. It was about a decade that I performed the effect. And I did the Gene Anderson tear, the Gene Anderson newspaper tear. I'm going to give you some history about that, give you some history on the effect. I no longer do it. I no longer do it for a number of reasons. I'm going to talk about that too. And you'll probably think I'm really eccentric when I tell you the reasons I don't do it. Well, I mean, a good reason why I don't do it is because I'm doing primarily mentalism. I say primarily mentalism because my show is a mixture of magic and mentalism. I could do it. I could actually do the torn and restored newspaper, no problem. I know Eugene Berger does the gypsy thread, which is a very similar concept. What you're doing, whether it's the gypsy thread or the cut and restored rope or the torn and restored newspaper, what you're doing is you're destroying something and recreating it. And that is a tremendous magical effect. Think about it. The metaphor of destruction and resurrection, of death and resurrection. That's powerful stuff, man. And I think when you watch Eugene Berger do the gypsy thread, you really get a sense for what meaning and magic can be. When it comes to, I mean, a lot of other people that do the gypsy thread, they just break the thread and restore it. But Eugene Berger tells this elaborate story about life and redemption, and it's just an amazing thing to see. I did a presentation a few weeks ago on the silent script, if you recall that. Silence. I actually offered you my notes on that subject because I think it's so important to the effectiveness of magic. But the silent script of any torn and restored, and you know what, this even applies broader to, say, sawing in half illusion or the destruction of a human being and putting them back together. It's a metaphor for the cycle of life. It's a metaphor for restoration. We all go through these periods in our lives. We go through these periods when things are great, and then all of a sudden things are not great, and there's mourning and there's sorrow, and then we come out of that and they're great again. It's that cycle that we go through. Death, burial, and resurrection. Death, burial, and resurrection. That if again, you don't have to say this to your audience. Eugene Berger says it. He really is explicit. But if you're thinking in the back of your mind about the overriding significance of a torn and restored effect, I think it adds a different dimension to the effect. So David, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm happy to do it. The torn and restored newspaper. The illusion is typically attributed to Cortini. Cortini was born 1890, passed away 1954. Magician from Germany who actually introduced the effect to the American audiences in 1922. Now, that said, you can go all the way back to Stanton's Magic. Stanton's Magic, Volume 3, Number 7, April 1903, page 62, where you will see a torn and restored newspaper effect. But most historians attribute the effect to Cortini, 1922. Bill Lohmeyer and Lou Brent had versions in the late 1920s. Carl Brema also had a version. Al Baker marketed his effect in 1931. Gene Hugard marketed effect in 1930. Joe Carson marketed effect. Al Koran, I'm going to come back to Al Koran in just a second. Al-Koran published his version in routine manipulation. That's very important because it kind of shows the progression of the effects. Slidini also did it. Robert Harbin did it. Terry Seabrook did it. So you have, once you have Cortini doing it in the United States, you have a lot of named magicians getting on the bandwagon, doing their versions of it or marketing a version of it. Now getting back to Al-Koran, Al-Koran publishes his version in routine manipulation. Gene Anderson, many believe, I don't know that this is, I don't have hard evidence, but Gene Anderson picked up on the routine of Al-Koran, added his own stuff to it, and published his unique version of the Torn and Restored newspaper in a book called Newspaper Magic by Gene Anderson. Now Doug Henning picked up on this and presented the Torn and Restored newspaper. For many, many years it was a staple in his effect. Prior to Doug Henning doing it, Denny Haney was doing it. Denny Haney did it on a routine basis, and it was a staple in his show. So two very prominent great magicians, Doug Henning, Denny Haney, both did the Gene Anderson version. Now here's a little anecdote for you. Gene Anderson published the complete script and pattern in Newspaper Magic, and it's a brilliant script about an illusion. It only sounds like the paper's tearing, it's just an illusion, and then the paper is restored by simply opening it up after it's torn to pieces. It's just a brilliant version. So I'm being mentored by Denny Haney. And Denny's telling me, you know, you need to do the Torn and Restored newspaper. You need to do the egg bag. You need to do the multiplying bottles by Ken Brook. And I'm learning, so I'm doing these things. I'm learning these things. And I pick up Newspaper Magic by Gene Anderson. I read it. I put the effect together the way Gene Anderson describes it. And I do the pattern that Doug Henning's doing, that Denny Haney's doing, and that Gene Anderson actually wrote. So I record a show. Now back in these days you're using VHS, which is one of the reasons why I don't have a version to show you of me performing it. I just couldn't find a digital version because back in those days it was all VHS. But I record a show, and I'm in the Funhouse Magic Shop, and I'm showing my videotape to Lou Walston, who was the owner and operator of the Funhouse Magic Shop. And I remember distinctly there were some other magicians beginning to gather, and Lou asked them to not watch. And I looked at Lou and I think, you know, what's the problem? And he said to me, I don't want anyone stealing your material. I just thought that was, it never occurred to me that some other magician in the shop would watch my show and want to do it. It just never occurred to me that would be a problem. But it occurred to Lou, and so he asked them to remain in another area of the shop while the two of us watched the video. Now I was asking him for a critique. So we get to the Gene Anderson newspaper tear, and Lou gets angry at me. And he says, "You're stealing Denny's act." And I said, what do you mean I'm stealing Denny's act? He says, he does the Torn and Restored newspaper. He does that exact pattern. And I said to Lou, I said, you know, Doug Henning does the exact pattern too. As a matter of fact, that exact pattern is published in Newspaper Magic. And he says, really? I says, really? So we get out the book and look, and there it is. The pattern's right there. So I just thought that was it, you know, so Lou's okay. But for the most part, my pattern was unique to me. It was a unique show. But when it came to the Torn and Restored newspaper, I still to this day think that Gene Anderson's pattern is fantastic, and I wouldn't change a word of it. So that's my story. That's the story of the Torn and Restored newspaper. If you're asking me for a recommendation, I think Martin Gardner might market one. Martin Lewis, I think, markets a version that's very interesting. You might want to check that out, but I've always done the Gene Anderson tear when I do it, and I highly recommend it to you. Now, the pro is, what you're going to, I mean, that when you tear that paper and people hear it being torn and they see it being torn, and then you flash, it's restored, and then you're flipping through the paper and showing all the pages, that is a tremendous effect. And I will tell you, every time I did it, and this is why Denny told me to do it, every time I did it, the audience reaction was palatable. They gasped. It's something that you have to experience. It's just a fantastic effect. Now, here's why I stopped. And, you know, you guys might say, well, Dave, come on. But here's why I stopped. Number one, it requires a lot of preparation. A lot of preparation. And there are tricks to it, too. I mean, you don't want to fold the paper in such a way that it doesn't open up naturally. So you really can't fold it down and pack it. It does not pack flat, let's put it that way. And it requires a lot of preparation to get the thing ready. So, you know, I got to the point where I want to be able to do a show in the morning, and a show in the afternoon, and a show in the evening, and I don't want a lot of mess in between. I want to be able to perform, put it away, go to the next show, perform, put it away, go to the next show. You can't do that with the Gene Anderson newspaper tear. You're going to have to make, if you're going to do 3 shows in a day, you're going to have to make 3 of them up. So that's one of the drawbacks of in the torn and restored newspaper in general. Cut and restored rope, not so much a big deal, right? Because you're just cut and rope, toss it away, cut and rope, toss it away, cut and rope, toss it away. No big deal. The torn and restored newspaper, though, is a big deal. There's a lot of preparation involved. The other thing that really disturbed me over a period of time, I was noticing I would do the effect early in the show. In fact, at some point it became my opener because it's just that strong. So I would open with the torn and restored newspaper, go on to other things. When I was finished the torn and restored newspaper, very often my hands were black from ink from the newspaper. And so I'd go through the show, and when I was doing, by the way, when I was doing the Sands of Egypt, the sand trick, that was no big deal, right? Because I could do the torn and restored newspaper, do the sand trick, and my hands were clean. So that's a good idea. But it was a problem because that ink was getting on some other props and discoloring them. Now, I could have sprayed a fix-it on an artist fix-it on the newspaper, and that would have solved that problem. I didn't do that. I just didn't go that far. I just decided, you know what? Between all the preparation and the ink on the hand, it's just not worth it to me. And the audience reaction was stellar. It was amazing, but I just decided it's just too much. It's just too much. So I took it out of the show. David, listen, I hope you enjoyed this. I know you waited a long time. And by the way, those of you who put comments down below and who make requests, I will get to them. I will get to them. But remember, I'm only posting once a week. I do get a lot of requests, and I love it. I love it. Please make your requests. Please make your comments. But it could be a while, you know, before I get around to it. I have a lot of things that I want to say. There's a lot of material that I want to put out there. And I'm only presenting on a weekly basis. But listen, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Please subscribe if you've not done so already. Please comment down below. And if you have a request, please make it. And David, thank you so much for coming back and reminding me, because it did put a fire under me. If I don't get to your request fast enough, put another comment down below. It'll light a fire under me, and I will get it done. Thank you so much. Have a great day.